Question to Mr. Wilkins. Correctional statistics before the implementation of Bill C-83 showed that the number of inmates in a maximum security facility dropped by as low as 8 or as high as 89 on an annual basis. In 2021, the first full year after C-83 was implemented, that number almost doubled to 158. Now, I've received an ATIP response that states that 505 inmates were transferred out of maximum security to medium security last year, ending March 2023 alone. Now, there are anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 inmates in maximum security in Canada. In your experience, is 505 transfers out of maximum security a high number in any given year?
It seems like a very high number. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this would have been relevant during COVID because we didn't have a lot of transfers happening, if you recall, during the pandemic. I assume that this is after the pandemic, but
yeah, so this is 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. There were 505 prisoners moved out of maximum security into medium security. Now, prior to C-83 coming into effect in June 2019, would you consider this a high number compared to the numbers in previous years?
I would.
Okay. In your experience, has the number of prisoner transfers, COVID notwithstanding, from maximum to medium security increased since Bill C-83 was brought into effect in June 2019?
Well, of course, with the elimination of segregation, which we would have had the segregation units in our medium security facilities across the country. And with the SIU model that has been put in place, most of the SIUs are in a maximum security institution. So that is going to increase the number of transfers between medium and maximum, ultimately just because you're moving from a medium security to a maximum security because of the SIU placement, and then back again potentially from the SIU placement. So absolutely, the introduction of the SIU model has increased the amount of movement between institutions across the country. There's no doubt about that.
Do you also attribute the addition under C-83 of the so-called least restrictive principle as partially responsible for this trend?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Inmates have the ability to file what's called a habeas corpus suit, saying that they're not being housed in the appropriate level according to their custody rating scale, for example. So, of course, the least restrictive is something that correctional service is always trying to strive towards. So that might mean movement between institution and institution.
Do you believe that this least restrictive principle, as enshrined in C-83, contributed to the reclassification of Paul Bernardo from a maximum to a medium security facility?
I'm quite certain that before Bill C-83 that there was something in the CCRA that talked about least restrictive, because I remember making the argument many times as even a local president that inmates that would normally be placed in segregation at the time, this is before Bill C-83, they were being placed in different ranges and different population management strategies occurring for those offenders. My example at the time was, there's general population and there's segregation. There is no other population. And if they can't be managed in general population, then they'd have to be in segregation. But I was always quoted.
I was reading your guys' 2018 submission on Bill C-83, and your recommendation was that the current language was the most appropriate restrictions, not the least restrictive.
That might be
and so it was not the least restrictive, it was the most appropriate restrictions. And so the introduction of these least restrictive, we've certainly seen through the review that was conducted after this transfer that had an impact. In your experience, when Paul Bernardo was denied reclassification in June of 2022, but then according to the review report, they changed their decision in July of 2022, just a month later. Is this a normal practice for them to change a decision just in 1 month?
I can't really speak to the decision that was made, particularly for the case management team at the time. And to be quite honest, I'm not involved that heavily into case management of every individual offender across the country as the national president of the union. I wouldn't say it's abnormal that that type of thing would happen, but I wouldn't say that it was normal, that it's an everyday occurrence either.